Well, welcome back. It's been almost the entire summer that we've gone without an Indiana Neighbor episode, but when we decided to bring it back up, we did it in a big way. This guy right here, Lloyd G. Now, some of his very closest friends call him Junior, but Junior G, of course. Junior, welcome back.
Thank you, Greg.
The alumni weekend, always a big weekend.
Good to be here. Always good to come back. Of course, I travel 1,000 miles. And
Yes, you do.
got here yesterday. And
How often do you make it back? Once a year?
basically, it's about it. Once a year. I actually bought a little mobile home 10 or 12 years ago in honor of my mother, who never owned a piece of property. But it was sitting empty about 10 months out of the year, so I ended up selling that. Bought a place in Las Vegas.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about the early beginnings of Junior G. I said Lloyd G. I assume that was your father's name, right? Lloyd was your father. When did Junior stick? Was it right away? Did you always know nothing? Did you never know anything but Junior as your name?
Junior G, and that's it. Yep. Rick Berry, he would kid me once in a while and call me Lloyd at the University of Miami. But no, that's it. I don't even like the name Lloyd.
Well, it's on your birth certificate.
And of course, I was born up in the Indian Springs in Cale.
Where are you?
Oh, yes.
At home? At home?
No, actually in the Bedford Hospital, but we lived in Indian and Cale.
Okay.
4 or 5 places up there. And went to the first grade in Dover Hill, and went to second grade Hickory Ridge.
Hickory Ridge. That's a new one on me.
North of Shoals.
Yeah.
And then we moved to Loogootee, excuse me, in third grade.
Well, thank God you did.
And that's when, Greg, I remember second grade at recess, I saw all these. Back then, Greg, we had a one-room school, and we had one teacher, Mr. Lee Haynes, and we had second grade, third grade, fourth grade. He'd teach third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders. And I remember one time they were out on the playground, second grade, I'm sorry. I saw these kids playing softball. Now, I'm just really little, and they're like fourth grade. I thought, man, that looks like fun. And come to Loogootee, and I'm in Mrs. Robinson, Eldina Robinson's class.
I had Eldina Robinson.
Okay.
So did my father.
Yeah, okay.
She was around a long time.
And Greg, when I played at recess, basketball, September, it was so hot, no air conditioning, and I played like it was the national championship or whatever. I come in that classroom sweating like crazy, and Mrs. Robinson, one day she said, Junior, you've got to quit coming in here all sweaty from playing that basketball. And I said, but Mrs. Robinson, I love basketball. She said, I know you do, but look at you. You're all sweaty. It's hot. And Greg, when I got the phone call from Indianapolis about the Hall of Fame, I actually got 2 calls. I came home from school, put my briefcase down, went in, and punched the phone. The messages is blinking. And the first message, this is Jack Butcher. I need to speak to you. And I'm standing there. Jack Butcher needs to speak to me. Didn't say anything else. Left me his phone number. I said, well, I didn't break any training rules when I played. So immediately there was a second call, and it was Roger Dickerson. It says, this is Roger Dickerson from the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. I want to be the first to congratulate you. Last night, you were selected to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And then I thought, well, that's what Coach called me about, but he didn't tell me. So, Greg, when I went up and got that message from Roger Dickerson, I get up and I go through the living room. My tears were bigger than any tears I ever cried. I'm saying, oh my gosh, I'm little Loogootee, Indiana. And I thought about Mrs. Robinson. I said, Mrs. Robinson used to tell me, you got to quit swiping like that. But that's a true story.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Mrs. Robinson, that's
Yeah.
why he did it.
Greg, when I got into high school, she said, would you like to mow my yard with my old push mower? And I said, well, sure. I needed the money. I mowed her yard for 3 years for 50 cents. She never gave me a tip and never gave me a raise. But man, I manicured her little yard across from the high school there on the corner.
Yeah, I remember where she lived. So the school, when you said second, third, fourth grade, the public school, it was where the city building is now? Is that where it was?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so they had all the grades in that one school, all the way up to high school?
The high school was upstairs and the elementary is downstairs.
Okay, very good.
And Greg, I lived on those outdoor. Your dad played on those outdoor court. Was he in the Korean
He was.
Korean War?
Yeah.
And I remember those guys would come in on after they got out of the war and they'd play outdoor on the weekend. Well, we didn't live far away, and I'd take my basketball and I'd shoot on that basket on the other side. And I used to watch them playing up there. And I was like in fifth grade. And I said, man, I like playing that game. And I kept, every day I'd come and shoot. Every day. One day they were short a guy, and they hollered, hey kid, you want to play? And Greg, I figured it out. I said, now if something happens, they don't have enough guys, and they asked me to play, I'm not going to shoot the ball. One time I'm going to pass it to everybody, and they might choose me the next week. Guess what, Greg? We go over there. I played. I didn't take one shot. Mm-hmm. And I think they thought, wow, this kid passes the ball. And I got chosen in the next week.
There you go. And that's a lesson to you young kids.
and I think that's where I learned to pass the ball, to share it with everybody. Yeah. And you know what? I played all through. I started on the 8th grade team 3 years. Jack Butcher used to take me out of the health class the last period of the day to come over to work with the 8th grade guys in physical education. It was funny. There'd be a knock on the door, and the teacher would say, hey, Coach Butcher needs you over to the gym. So basketball was more important in that health class.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your parents, your siblings. Let's find out about your mom and dad a little bit.
Well, Greg, if anybody had it tougher than the G family, I have 7 brothers and sisters, 5 sisters and 2 brothers. I can't think of a family that had it tougher financially and so forth. My dad was a World War II vet, and he became an alcoholic, overcoming the war and seeing his buddies shot and everything.
Sure. Not unusual back then.
Yeah, that happened to a lot of guys, and that's why I hate war. He couldn't hold a job down. My parents ended up getting divorced. My mother basically raised us. What a great mom she was.
Her name was?
Wilma.
Wilma.
Your mother's name.
Wilma.
Yep. Wilma G. Yeah. And she would not go on welfare. What a great mother she was. And the love she gave all of us kids. But man, we had it so tough. Greg, we lived in my brother Joe, when I got out of college, we sat one night. I said, Joe, how many homes did we live in? He said, oh my goodness. Greg, we started counting. That's when I just got out of college. Connie and I were over at Joe's house. And we started counting. And we lived all over the place. We lived from time I was born to I graduated high school, so 18 years, we lived in 17 rental homes. And we didn't know if we got evicted. We were young. We didn't know any different. But my poor mother worked in restaurants, waiting on tables. But we came out all right.
Yeah.
But sports was, you see this shirt?
I see it.
This is my love. I still love this game. Yeah. I still want to play, but I can't physically.
Do you dream about it every now and then?
Oh my gosh, Greg. And And basketball was my escape, and baseball, but basketball was my escape from a really tough life at home. And God bless my mom. And but we made it. We did okay. But this was my life. I told my mom, "Don't buy me any toys for Christmas. Just get me a new basketball." This is God's truth. Just get me a basketball. And I spent more time on the outdoor courts, probably more than any two guys. That's my life. And I was fortunate to have God gifted athletic ability.
I was going to go there because your, I guess, your work ethic is legendary. Okay. We know that you worked hard to get where you were. But did you have that God given ability? And if so, where did you get that from, you think? Was your father an athlete?
Well, I can remember throwing it, my sister Patty, you knew her. We'd play catch on the street, baseball. Patty was very athletic.
Yeah.
I told her one time, "You should be a professional bowler." My gosh, she'd beat all of us in bowling. But anyway, Dad one Sunday came out. He's left-handed, like my brother Donnie. And my dad's throwing a baseball. And my gosh, I thought, man, he's athletic. And then we got in a little, he said, "I can beat you in a race." And so I guess he was a little athletic, but I don't know where it came from. I do not know.
Did he go to, he didn't go to Loogootee schools, did he,
No,
growing up?
I don't know.
Don't know where he was from?
Well, I don't know, to be honest, where my dad went to school or anything. We're just trying to find a place to live and get some food on the table.
Yeah.
And my first competition that I kind of figured out I was a competitor, first grade, I won a little spelling contest, and you had a choice of 5 pennies or 5 pieces of candy. What do you think I took? I took the pennies. But anyway, I said, "Hey, I like that." So I don't know where my competitiveness come from. I think it was the fact that this game of basketball was my out.
Yeah.
And of course, baseball too. And I just loved it. I fell in love with it. I don't know why. I've always said, why did I fall in love with this game? You know, to this day, Greg, I still watch and play the game as I'm watching. Watching how they set their picks and critique the way they play and
Coaching,
so forth.
still coaching, yeah.
Yeah.
You told me just a little while ago that, yeah, you were embarrassed at the time during school to live in 17 different riddles. I mean, maybe that was uncommon, but did you see people looking down at you, or was it more internal?
Greg, that's a good question. At that point, Greg, I was ashamed of my dad.
Okay.
He'd come from work on a Friday, and he'd go to the local bar and spend half the paycheck, and come home sometimes and talk about the war. He's got to bring a couple of his buddies in the kitchen, and they'd be drinking. I'm like 5, 6 years old. I think my dad might have seen me play basketball in 4 years, probably 3 times. And I was embarrassed. He would be down against that wall, standing up, half drunk. And I thought he was a bad guy. And I was embarrassed. I never talked about my dad to my classmates or anything. And my classmates had no idea what my thoughts were about my home life, about how tough it was. And I would never talk about it. I was envious of a lot of my classmates, and I've even told them that. For example, Carla Green, only child, had a nice bedroom and all that, you know. And here we were, little young kids, 2 or 3 in the bed and whatever, that we just struggled. And it was tough. And then, of course, when I got in high school, Paul Arvin and Bill McGovern gave me a job at the theater. And I told my mom, you don't have to spend any money. I'll buy my own clothes, and you just take care of the rest of the kids and that thing. So that was good. Yeah.
You said 5 sisters, 2 brothers.
5 sisters, 2 brothers.
Can you name them quickly? That's not an easy feat.
Yeah.
The names of your siblings?
Well, we got, of course, my older sister, Lois.
Okay.
I think she lives over in the Jeffersonville or Clarksville. I think Lois got married when she was like 14.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, back then, Greg,
I know.
if you were from a poor family like mine,
Yeah.
except if you were in sports, as soon you got 16, you dropped out of school.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it was to get out of the household and try to, get whatever. But Lois, my oldest one, then there's Patty, and then Judy. Of course, that's who I'm staying with, Pat and Judy.
Senate, right?
And then Brenda, and then Peggy, who we lost recently. And then my brother Joe, and then, of course, my younger brother Donnie.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the first to graduate from high school, and I'm in the middle. My brother Joe finally went to the military for a couple of years, and then he became city policeman, chief of police, spent 20 years, came to sheriff of the county for 2 terms. So he did good. Mm-hmm. He dropped out at 16, went back, got his GED later.
But a completely respected person in the community.
Yeah.
What more can you ask, right?
And I look at you, Greg. I think about your dad and mom, and I think, I see you guys at the banquet and your close-knit family. I said, man, what a blessing. I hope that those kids know what a great dad they've got, Jim Bateman.
We do.
And it's a heartwarming to see that type of setting, because I didn't have that. Right. And it's okay. Yeah. I'm okay.
Yeah, you did all right. You mentioned Paul Arvin, Bill McGovern. They were people of influence to you. Oh. So even though you went through life in high school or grade school, I guess, somewhat embarrassed, somewhat shameful, typically there are people who bring you out of that, people who bring you to where you feel you respect yourself. Was it Bill? Was it Paul? Was it anybody else that you can think of in those formative years?
Well, basically it was Paul. And back then, Bill McGovern and Paul Arvin went to 5th grade games. They played basketball. Mm-hmm. And so they had seen me play from 5th grade all the way up. And they liked giving athletes a job at the theater, especially if they needed a job, which I certainly did.
My dad was one of those.
And he was like a father to me. Mm-hmm. Greg, on Sunday when we'd be working, Paul bring out his catcher's glove, and we go out on the sidewalk while the movie's being played, and he worked with me on my pitching. But Paul was like a dad to me, and he was a mentor. But Paul, I'll never forget this. I set the scoring record. I beat Bill Nigg's record one night. I scored 43. I go to work the next night, and Paul said, wow, you had a good game last night. I said, well, thanks, Paul. He said, but I want you to know you don't have the field goal record. I said, oh, okay. I think I had 17 field goals against Montgomery. And I said, how do you know that? He said, because I have the record. I said, Paul, you guys didn't even score 18 points back then. He took me called Lester Page, took me up to high school, and we went down to the basement in the old high school, got out the old dusty scorebooks. I think it's 1927. He opens it up. Paul Arvin, 18 field goals. I said, oh, okay, you got the record, Paul. Anyway, that was kind of neat.
Yeah, because Paul, if anybody knew Paul, and I didn't know him like you did, but he was known for his tales, right? I mean, he could tell some tales. So it's a good thing he went up to you and proved that. Otherwise, it would have been hard to believe.
Yes, talk's cheap.
Yeah, boy, he was something else.
But I'll never forget that. Yeah, Mr. Page said, what are you guys doing down here? Oh, we'll see the record books.
Yeah. Did Paul take an interest in people like you who were maybe underprivileged at home, or was it because of athletics? Paul saw something in you.
That's a good question.
Because he did that not only with you, but with a lot of people. Help give them jobs. And
he just cared. Paul was such a caring guy. I got a letter. I go from 8th grade to freshman year. I got this anonymous letter that was sent to the school. All the letters, because we moved everywhere. But when I got recruiting letters and everything, it always came to Loogootee High School. Back then, you even had to put the address.
I know. Mom and Dad.
The postman, they knew where we were at. So I got this anonymous letter, little one-page letter, and it said, I just want you to know that you're going to be a star basketball player, baseball, and I just want you to know that you're going to be an example for young kids. They're going to have those little eyes on you as you play through your career. And you'll be a role model for these kids. So just remember, when you're playing or when you're off the court, that these little kids are going to look up to you as a role model. And Greg, I took that all through high school, college, and basically in life. I always want to be a role model for my kids, my two sons, Michael and David, and other kids. But I never knew who sent me that letter, but I think it might have been Paul.
But it was an important letter in your life.
But it became part of my life, and I'm so happy I got that letter. Yeah. Greg, when we come off the bench, I would jog to my center court position for the jump ball. I never walked because I remembered Gary and Dean Schwarzentrooper. Their dad, mom came to every game and brought those two kids. And here's Dean and Gary down there, like 4th and 5th grade. And we're shooting our pregame warm up, and they're waiting for a ball to come over so they could get it. And I'd intentionally let it roll over to them.
Kids love that.
And it was so cool. But I was so blessed with.
Who were your little eyes looking at whenever you were growing up? Who were your eyes looking at when you were growing up? Those role models.
Wilmer Whitmer.
Wilmer Whitmer.
Oh, Wilmer Whitmer. Greg, this is the truth. When I'm in elementary, like 5th, 6th, maybe even 7th grade, every day during the basketball season, I ran to the gym door, wait for Coach Butcher to come and unlock the old padlock, and I'd run in, and while the guys were dressing, I would get to shoot some baskets every day. And I would sit in that gym for 3 hours during practice watching them. But I'd get to shoot some hoops while they went on a water break or Coach Butcher was doing a chalk talk. I'd get to shoot. Every day. And that was my life. One day Butcher came up to me and says, would you like to help the student managers with their equipment and stuff? He said, you can ride on the bus with us to the games. Yeah. And Wilmer Whitmer, God, he was tough. Such a nice guy, but boy, did he have a soft touch, the bank shots. And he always patted me on the back and said, you got to work hard. And Bill Nigg I looked up to. Those two guys I think of as kind of my role models. I didn't know Jack Butcher. I remember one time I was over at the old Larkin Brothers store. They had a TV in there. I go over on Saturday and watch Saturday game of the week out of Channel 4. Mm-hmm. And one day Mr. Larkin, he says, hey, he said, Jack Butcher's going to be on today. And I said, well, who's Jack Butcher? That's the truth. I'm down there about 5th grade. Yeah. And he said, well, he's a star basketball player. He's at Memphis State. And I said, oh, okay. But I said, who's Jack Butcher?
Yeah. Well, you got to know him pretty well. You had mentioned that Coach Butcher had asked you if you wanted to help the student manager be on the bus. Do you have a feeling that he kind of knew what was going on at that point, and he wanted to keep an eye on you and make sure that your love for the game stayed true?
You know, Coach Butcher's always mentioned over the years how he'd be maybe driving through town and he'd see me with my basketball. I'd dribble around these parking meters that we used to have. And he said, "You never saw this G kid without a basketball." And I think he saw me early and he said, "You know what? I'm going to be here a long time. I want to keep an eye on this kid." And then I started going to the gym, watching the practices, and I think he figured out I loved the game. And, he had guts enough to start me as a freshman.
Yeah.
That took guts.
That didn't happen a lot back then, did it?
And, but he never put anybody up on a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, night I scored 43. He just said, "Hey, good game." No big deal.
Yeah.
So,
how did you get from place to place to these games, to the practices? Did you live in town to where you could get on your bike and go, or did somebody have to take you everywhere you went?
well, mostly in town, so you could walk about wherever you need to go. And I can remember in the wintertime when snow on the ground, I was a freshman and Bill Nigg was a senior. He always gave me a ride home. And I remember in the yearbook, he said, "I'm going to wheel this old Ford of mine to Junior G." But I never did get it, Greg. But, we might have an old beat up car, but I went through high school without a car. And I had some good friends that lived neighbors that they let me use the car once in a while.
Any resentment from the older players as you played above them as freshman, sophomore? Do you remember seeing any resentment from the juniors and the seniors? Because I'm sure you were the hot shot kid and you were playing in front of them, but did that ever strike you at all?
Not really. I just kind of took things as they came.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So your most memorable game in high school, I know you scored the 43. What was your most memorable game, though?
Greg, I read a book once where Johnny Wooden said, now Johnny Wooden, the great coach, great player, 7 straight championships NCAA at UCLA. I saw in a book one time where he said the most precious moment was winning the first sectional in high school. And I've always said, Loogootee had never beaten the Hatchets in all the years of basketball. My sophomore year, we upset the Hatchets in the sectional. And that game has been so precious because I knew it was important to Loogootee, the city of Loogootee, and Loogootee High School. So that was the big one. And of course, the biggest loss was my senior year.
We'll get to that.
Yeah. But winning that sectional, beating the Hatchets.
Yeah.
Because Butcher used to say, "Gotta hate those Hatchets." I didn't really know what they meant, you gotta hate those Hatchets because they were a big school.
Oh yeah.
And to do that, we had a bonfire at the city square, and on the fire truck took us into town. And man, you talk about good memories about that year. Of course, we won it again the next year, but that one right there was for the city of Loogootee and Loogootee High School and all of us former athletes.
I remember, Junior, we lived in a trailer in 1968, and we were listening to the sectional, Joe Edwards, and Washington had beaten somebody.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I remember somebody in the community said, "Oh, they pay off the refs," right? And I'm 8 years old.
Yeah, okay.
I hated the Hatchets after that. How could they do that? How could they pay off the refs? Is that fair?
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. The hate was real back then. And then it got to be the hate for Loogootee later on because of the same thing. But describe for me, Junior, because I hear, well, my dad and mom talked about it. You see it everywhere. Describe for me after game nights. Describe for me the sectional during the days when there were 11 teams and it was like a holiday going down to Washington to the tournament. Talk about some of those times for me.
Well, of course, back then, one class basketball, you know, we had 13 teams in a sectional at one time. And you know, you played two games on that Saturday. You played a midday, and then if you won, you came back and played the finals at night. And you know, Greg, the importance of basketball was incredible to the community. You're 8 years old listening to the games on radio. Kids don't do that today. They don't do that. But that was you were listening to every move, everything Joe Edwards had to say, and it was like the World Championship.
Well, I cried when your team lost to North Davies, but we'll get to that later on too. But you're right. I mean, it meant so much to kids like me. It shaped part of our lives.
Yes.
But the Aero Cafe, you know, I hear after games, I see pictures of Jack Butcher and his teams in there. I know St. John's went in. Did you ever meet up, St. John's and Loogootee, after the games?
The Aero Cafe.
The Aero Cafe.
The Aero Cafe. Listen, that place was packed after Friday night games. Yeah. When St. John's played, we played. Mm-hmm. Back in the days, you couldn't hardly get in the Aero Cafe. And that was, you'd interact with each other, the Eagles, and they'd say, hey, how many points you get tonight? How many did you get in your game? And so forth. And we were.
You say you did interact or you didn't?
Oh, yeah.
You did.
Oh, yes. Listen, let me tell you something, Greg. Loogootee St. John's School was incredible because they had great parents, great teaching, and those kids, John O'Malley had so much respect from Loogootee High School. It was incredible, that school and the type of students that went to school there. They didn't look at you as an enemy, even though in sports you sort of were. But it was a blessing that we had those two schools, actually.
Do you remember your trivial stuff now? But do you remember what you would put in for the jukebox at the Aero Cafe? What was your favorite song on the jukebox there?
The what now?
The jukebox at the Aero Cafe.
Oh, my gosh. Listen. It's almost tear-jerking to think there's no Aero Cafe in Loogootee.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the old jukebox, man, you put those nickels in there.
Didn't they have jukeboxes at the table?
Yeah.
I thought so, yeah.
Oh, yeah, where you could, oh, yes, yeah. Put your money in and pick out the song, flip through there and get the song you wanted. Yeah. And
now, I
call this the good old days.
Oh, boy. It sounds like it, that's for sure. Now, were you a ladies' man? How could you not be?
No.
How could you not be?
Connie, she was my neighbor.
Connie
Bowling. She's a Catholic girl. And we actually were boyfriend, girlfriend all 4 years. I was totally dedicated to basketball. And what Jack Butcher told you, you followed. Mm-hmm. You get in at this time, you don't break training rules, and all the above. And you know, I had girls call me and all that stuff, you know, but no.
But Connie bought into that. She was okay with that.
Oh, yeah. Well, she didn't know all of it.
No, I meant the training and the dedication to basketball.
Oh, yeah. And she knew my love for the game, the passion that I had, and she knew how tough I had it at home. And I think she realized that was my escape through my life, basically. And she knew how it was I played the game like it was life and death. Thank goodness we had a good coach like Butcher, and we won. It killed me to lose a game. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to talk to Connie. And even when I was in college, we lose a game. Man, I don't talk to anybody. Don't talk to me for a day.
Well, you didn't lose a lot in high school.
Yeah, we were
if I saw that, 84-12, I think.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Crazy. So you won the sectional your sophomore year. You won it your junior year?
Junior year.
All right, let's talk about your senior year. I mean, by all accounts, it was a historic season. Undefeated during the regular season. If I remember right, what I saw was your average margin of victory was over 30 points per game.
Yep.
You had won 35 games in a row, which was the most in the state at that point in time, regular season games. Sectional comes along. Are you favored?
I would
Washington's
say yes.
Always very strong.
I'd say yes, we were favored. Yes. Mm-hmm. I would say so.
So take me through the first game of the sectional was who? Do you remember?
I think it might have been St. John's.
St. John's.
And we played Offordsville, and we won both of those games. I know we beat Offordsville by about 30, and like you said, we averaged winning for the whole year. We averaged winning by 30, 32, 33 points. And then we played the Hatchets in that final game. If only I had have seen the movie Hoosiers. I've thought about that, Greg.
Yeah.
We led the Hatchets by 9 at the half. Mm-hmm. 9 at the half. Later on, you didn't beat Loogootee if they're ahead of you 9 at the half. You didn't beat Jack Butcher's teams. So, Greg, Steve Craney was the coach of the Hatchets. And I've heard rumors that he outcoached Butcher. That was the thing after the sectional we got beat. I look back on that game, and all Steve Craney did was what he had to do, and that was switch defense, because it wasn't working the first half. He went into a 2-1-2 zone. And I think back to that. Bobby Plump held the ball against Muncie Central for forever. Mm-hmm. Stood there and held it. And I think about that game, and I said, man, now the Hatchets scored the first basket second half. We're up 7. We come down the floor. I just wish I had stood there, let the clock run.
Yeah.
But we were so used to scoring.
Yeah, high scoring team.
And suddenly everybody went cold. And that zone wasn't anything great. It's just we were not hitting. And then all of a sudden, the game changed. That third quarter. I think about that game probably every week to this day. And I always say, man, I wish I'd have seen the movie Hoosiers. Mm-hmm. I'd have held that ball. They couldn't take that ball away from us. But that's hindsight.
Well,
that hurt.
It's hindsight, but I think that's what Coach Butcher said, that won't happen again.
I think that game made a better coach out of Jack Butcher. I really did. Yeah. And I asked him one time, I said, how do you approach a game? He says, well, I evaluate the talent, who we're playing, and what we have to do. And he says, I figured out if we're playing a team's big and strong and everything, we're just going to wait and take our time. But I think of the 75 team, the Indianapolis.
Columbus North, the big team.
Who was that they beat?
Columbus North.
Columbus North. Mm-hmm. Oh, my gosh. And you know Mark Riggins, great baseball player. And Mark only averaged about 5 points a game with that team, but he was so important, because he knew his role. Mm-hmm. And
they all did. Mike Walls, Kenny Madigan, Kenny Nigg.
Oh, they were so disciplined. Jack Butcher had that team so disciplined. It was like a perfect game for the Lions, and that's the way they played. They just wait. till
Yeah,
that
yeah.
time
They
came.
didn't hold the ball.
No,
They just passed and
they,
passed
yes,
until the big guys couldn't.
they didn't take bad shots.
Didn't take bad shots.
They didn't take bad shots, and that's discipline. And you got to credit the players for their role. I look at Mark Riggins. Here's a guy that scored 4 or 5 points a game, but he was so valuable mentally and physically as part of that team. And I hope Dave Smith,
Yeah.
our new coach, if I were to give Dave one advice, make sure every player from top to bottom know what their role is, because you got to let those kids know what your role is. Greg, you may not be a great player, but in practice, you rebound, you play defense, you help the team. We had a kid like that, Terry Hall, in high school. But man, he worked so hard. So it's important that you know what your role is.
Well, Dr. Birch here in town, Dr. Richard Birch, he was on that 75 team. Didn't get a lot of playing time, but he's told me over the years, he knew he was important to that team in practice. And how many people can say that today that don't get the playing time? They can say it, but what's their attitude? What's their thought? So, yeah, I mean, perfect example.
And also, Greg, it's got to come from that player's parents too.
Yeah,
They've got to understand, and like the Richard Birch, and his dad was a good player at Montgomery, and
right.
and I'm sure the family accepted that role. And some parents think their kid's twice as good as he is. And a guy like Rick, you talk about the Birch kid, his dad probably understood, my son is not
If I said Richard,
great player.
I meant Chris Birch, Dr. Chris Birch.
Yeah.
Richard was very good. Richard was on our semi-state team. Dr. Birch, though, he was good as well, but didn't get the playing time, but he knew his role.
That's right.
And that's important. So you lose that game. Your career is over in high school basketball. Do you remember that night?
Yeah, it's. I cried for a week, and didn't want to talk to anybody. And then, of course, I'm getting recruited like crazy. Jack Butcher had to even call them off a little bit my senior year. And I'm getting bombarded, and here I am, the poorest kid in town, and I didn't know I'm going to go to college, and can I make it? Yeah. Can I make it in college and whatever? And because academically I was not a good student, I was just an average student.
Okay.
And actually I got married. Colleen and I got married when I was in college, and she's probably a lot of credit goes to her for me being able to graduate from college.
I want to talk about the recruiting process in a little bit, but we'll talk about baseball for a little bit, because obviously, well, not obviously, if you don't know, Junior G was an incredible baseball player as well. But did you get letters for baseball as well?
A few. Now, Greg, back then we only played like 8 or 9, 10 games. Yeah. There was no sectional. Today they play 20, 25 games or whatever.
Games, yeah.
So there wasn't a great exposure, and a lot of your colleges didn't give full scholarships in baseball because they weren't money making. Well, they weren't money makers like they are today. Right. Florida State, I got a letter from them, and but no, not really a lot of contact in baseball. And I've been told by many people, you should have played baseball. I did play my freshman year at Miami, but the sports overlap so much. They're playing baseball in January, and we're still playing basketball for 2 months. And academically, it was tough to play 2 sports. So I did not play after my freshman year, and fell in love with golf.
Yeah, well, there was no golf team, right?
Yeah.
There was no golf team in high school, right?
Oh, no, there weren't any golf clubs in Loogootee, I don't think.
Where would the closest golf course have been to Loogootee?
French Lick.
Okay, yeah, that's not too bad. Yeah.
French Lick, hill course.
Yeah.
Larry Bird country.
Larry Bird country, yeah. So before we get to college, there are 2 things that I want you to expand upon a little bit. Describe game nights at the old high school gymnasium. Uh, doesn't seem very many, but people are overlapping. They're on the stage. Tell me about the environment on game nights.
You mean like the recruiting trail?
No, I'm talking about when you actually played, you were warming up, the games were crazy. So the fans, it had to be crazy at that little cracker box of a gymnasium.
Oh my gosh, Greg. It's amazing what we accomplished in that little gym. And I think that hurt us in a regional. Go to Huntingburg, you thought you were Madison Square Garden.
Oh boy.
Greg, but in that gym, people were fighting to get in, to get a seat.
Yeah.
And standing on, the out of bounds line was only about 1.5 feet maybe to the wall, to the bleachers. You'd have to stand sideways sometimes to throw it in.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be so overcrowded, there'd be people lined along the wall. They'd be patting you on the back and say, hey, that type of thing. And it was, the scene was Hoosiers.
Yeah.
That was Hoosier stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy. We drove by the gym yesterday, and my sister Judy's son, Brian, I said, hey, Brian, see that building right there? I said, that's where I lived. Yeah. And I told Pat, I'm so glad they've kept that gym. It looks great.
Great.
And I talked to my friend Dave Small from Ireland. They tore their gym down. Odin tore their gym down. A lot of these towns, small towns, they just tore them down. They couldn't afford to keep them up.
Right.
So we're fortunate. We got 3 gyms here.
Yeah, we do. But we were going to do, by the way, the intent of this interview was to be sitting at midcourt, much as we did Bryan, Canada, at the old high school gym where all the magic of Junior G happened. But it just so happens it's about 110 degrees out there. And we thought the library here, thank you, Darla Wagler again, would be a much cooler environment. And it is. So we're here instead of the old gym.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to bring up, Junior, was this would show the respect to Junior G, but I'm sure a lot of, I'll call them old timers because they are. They'll remember the chant at, I think it was the sectional, was it not? Maybe the Hatchets. You know where I'm going with that?
Oh, hey, listen.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Greg.
You couldn't do that today, by the way.
Oh, my goodness. Greg, my Connie, the wife, my girlfriend, she kept scrapbooks all 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, and 2 years of St. John's. And over the years, I remember seeing this one article, and it had a picture of a rope and a noose in the rafters at the old gym in Washington. And it said, we got a rope, we got a tree, all we need is Junior G. And that was a big thing back there in the Washington paper and so forth. And the Loogootee people weren't very happy about that.
What about your mom?
Yeah.
What did she think about that?
Well,
it was a sign of respect.
She probably wanted to hang somebody at Washington,
okay.
Referees.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, we had the nostalgia sectional.
Yes, I was there. I remember that.
1990, 91, yeah. And we played the Hatchets, beat them both times. We won it. But Greg, I have it on a tape. I'm in the game, and here, nostalgia, sectional, the Hatchets, the student body was there.
Cheerleaders.
And the cheerleaders, and I'm playing. And I hear this, we got a rope, we got a tree. And I'm thinking, oh my God. And I couldn't wait to get down the floor, and I got the ball in front of their cheerleaders, and I hit a 3. And I turned around, went like that, and one of the girls threw a pom-pom at me as I was running down the court. We had bad blood.
Well, by the way, that had to have been the first 3-point basket you ever made.
Yeah.
Because there were none when you played. But yeah, that had to have been when somebody came up with that idea. Junior G had to think, oh my gosh, this is a dream come true, right?
They're going to hang me.
No, you get to go back out on the court and play,
Yeah.
even if it's several years later.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So high school's over. You're going to college. Like you said, maybe sixth, seventh, eighth grade, you never even dreamed of college.
Oh, heavens, no.
But you've got no choice now. They're coming at you in droves. Tell me about the recruiting process.
Wow, it's pretty incredible. Here's the poorest kid in town, and I got all these colleges all over sending letters, and I went up to Butler and had dinner with Tony Hinkle, the great Tony Hinkle. Went to IU with Branch McCracken and his wife, Coach Butcher, and I went up there. And Evansville, spent a couple nights with Jerry Sloan there, McCutcheon. He told me, he said, I think we can find a uniform to fit you. But anyway, Miami. Bob Green at Vincennes, multi-millionaire construction business.
Hotel, yeah.
His son Robert, they owned a home in Coral Gables. The Greens did. They had their own private plane, had the runway, back of their house, a runway to land their plane. And Mr. Green wanted Robert, his son, who played at Vincennes, to go to Miami because they could, in the wintertime, they'd go down, stay in their house, and Robert, they could see him play on the basketball team. Well, Mr. Green found out about me, and he told Bruce Hale, the coach, you need to go look at this G kid up in Loogootee, little town Loogootee. He said, what's a Loogootee? Mm-hmm. So anyway, he made 3 trips, and they'd go down and fly him up to Vincennes, and he'd get in this brand new Cadillac, drive over to Loogootee. And my mother got to meet him, and what a wonderful man. He played in the original NBL in Indianapolis. And but anyway, made 3 trips up here. Met Paul Arvin, Bill. We went out to the river where Paul and Bill had the cabin out there. Met Paul and Bill and some of the other guys.
Bruce Hale went out there? Coach Hale went out to the river?
Yeah. So anyway, that 3rd trip, now we went to Miami, my mother, my brother, Connie, and Joe, on a recruiting trip. They flew us into Miami, put us in the Holiday Inn. We were there like 4 days. Got to meet the president of the university, and took me to the beach. Took us to the beach, and met Rick Barry, All-American. And but Bruce Hale told me that last trip, Greg, he said, how many states have you been in? I said, well, went over to Owensboro, Kentucky to play some baseball. And Paul Arvin and Bill McGovern took me to St. Louis to a couple of baseball games. I said, that's all I've been. He said, you will get an education just traveling with us. He said, we go from Miami to New York, all the way out to California and in between, which was true. And he said, but the last trip he made, Greg, I remember watching IU on TV, and they had like 15 guys dressed out. There's 10 on the bench, 5 on the court. And they wanted me really bad. I always wondered, I don't want to be one of those 10 guys on the bench. I didn't know how good I was going to be in college. Bruce Hale told me, he said, Junior, I want to bring you to Miami to play, not to sit on the bench. That resonated with me. I said, that's what I wanted to hear. And that's how I got recruited.
What did your mom think about that? You moving all the way down to Miami?
Mom,
never been away from home.
And it was fine. It was A.O. because she loved Bruce Hale. She said, wow, you're going to be with a good coach.
Did she get to come down and watch some of the games?
The Greens flew her down a few times in her private jet.
Wow.
Donnie actually came a couple times. Mm-hmm. Mom and I flew to New York in that plane to Madison Square Garden to watch Miami play. And they're probably illegal recruiting,
Yeah.
but they wined and dined us, and what a blessing to go there and play for such a good guy and travel the whole United States.
Right.
And get to play with a guy like Rick Barry.
Yeah, my gosh, it's crazy. But Tony Hinkle wanted you to be the next Bobby Plump, right?
Yeah.
Branch McCracken wanted you to play, and so close to home. But it almost sounds like it was a no-doubter. You'd made your decision and never looked back, right?
Right. Greg, I had to tell you a story. Scenic Hill, you people listening or watching, especially old timers. We lived out on Scenic Hill, just over the hill by the highway, by that little filling station. There was a little house there. Judy and I were talking about it last night. We lived in a one-bedroom house, and we still have 5 kids at home. We were sleeping everywhere. Matter of fact, Bill Drake, my teammate, my senior year, he said, "You're coming to live with me and my grandmother for the basketball season." So I actually lived with Bill and his grandmother. She'd fix us breakfast and everything. But anyway, one Saturday after the sectional's over, I happened to be at the house. Mom was working as usual, and I was actually the only one there. There's a knock on the door. So I answer the door, and standing right there was 3 guys, Dick and Tom Van Arsdale, and Jerry Bass.
Here in Loogootee.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the Van Arsdales were from Indianapolis, right?
But they came down from IU.
Okay.
And I look at them, and they're about 6'4", 6'5", weighed about 230 each. I knew who they were, of course. We had an old beat-up couch that probably was given to us. Greg, this is the truth. I said, "Oh my gosh, do I invite them in?"
This was unannounced. Unannounced?
Yeah. Oh, unannounced. I had no idea. They said, "Hey, we were coming through Loogootee, and Coach McCracken says, 'Hey, if you get a chance to find out where Junior G lives, stop in and say hi to him.'" Well, I knew McCracken sent him down there later on. So I said, "Man, what if they both come in and sit down on that couch and it crashes through?" Oh. Greg, that's the truth. I was worried about that old couch that was, somebody probably threw it away or was giving it away.
Right.
And they sat down and it didn't crash through. And I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, thank you." and they really wanted me to go to IU. I'm in New York City. We had a game in New York City. And the Van Arsdales, who were identical, Tom got drafted by the New York Knicks, and Dick went to Phoenix Suns. First time they'd ever been apart. So our Miami team is in New York. We had a game, and we'd gone down to Madison Square Garden that morning to just warm up, as you usually do for the night game. So we're going back to the hotel in downtown New York. Rick Jones and I were walking together, looked down the sidewalk. I said, "Rick, there's Dick Van Arsdale." So he's walking toward the garden to warm up, I guess, practice. So he got close. I said, "Dick Van Arsdale." He looked at me and he said, "You didn't go to IU." And I said, "No, I'm at Miami." We had our Miami shirts on and everything. He said, "Branch McCracken wanted you bad." I said, "I know, but I'm pretty happy at Miami."
Yeah, girls, beaches, it's hard to pass up Miami.
But I'll never forget that old couch.
and Bruce Hale made true to his promise, right? But when you were eligible to play, you played.
Greg, back then you couldn't play as a freshman.
Right.
I think I averaged 25 a game on the freshman team. We played I think we were like 21-4. And my sophomore year, there was one guard spot open. And I got the starting nod. Yeah. And it was back to that passing I was telling you about on the playground. and my skills were mostly ball handling and passing. And Bruce Hale needed somebody to get the ball to Rick Barry.
Why not?
So Bruce Hale was true to his word. I started every game from the time I arrived there. And God, I loved that guy. And Greg, everywhere we went, he made sure that we saw something important. For example, we're in Houston, and we took a tour of the Astrodome. That was when they sent astronauts to the moon. We took a tour of the Astrodome. We got to go to the Mardi Gras in New Orleans. And we're in New York playing Niagara University. He put us in a limo and took us into Canada to see Niagara Falls. We stood next to Niagara Falls. In California, we got to go across the Golden Gate Bridge. We saw the Alcatraz prison, Chinatown. Everywhere we went, if Coach Hale thought we needed to see something like that, he made sure we did it.
I'll bet there were some phone calls to your mom. Mom, you're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe where I am.
And that was back in the day, Greg, when you call home, collect.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
You call collect.
Yeah.
Or you put money in the phone. Connie and I'd be standing there and put money in there. Your 3 minutes are up. Put another quarter in or dime or whatever.
Yeah. You mentioned Rick Jones. Was he not Mr. Basketball?
Mr. Basketball in '63, they won the state championship.
So he was Mr. Basketball. You are on the Indiana All-Star team as well.
I was number 10.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that experience.
Oh, wow. To get back then, Greg, and probably now too, but to be selected to the Indiana All-Star team, that didn't get any better than that. I never ever expected, you didn't pick somebody from a small town like Loogootee.
10 best players in the state of Indiana. That's what they're looking for.
They picked 10 out of the entire state.
Right.
And I was so happy just to be on that team. And Greg, they took us to Indianapolis, put us in a hotel, and we practiced for 9 days before the first game against Kentucky. You don't do that anymore.
No.
You bring them up the day of the game.
Yep.
And I got telegrams from Dr. Let's wife Mary and different people wishing me good luck and all that. And Greg, the first game we played against Kentucky, we had like 14,000 fans in Hinkle Fieldhouse. Butler now.
Mm-hmm.
And I played 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
And I didn't even think about it, though. I was so happy to be on that team. Went down to Kentucky and Louisville, played in Freedom Hall the second game. Of course, my mom comes in there and my brother and a lot of Loogootee people. And I played like 3 minutes. And later on, about the time Bill Butcher played on that All-Star team, complaints were sent all over the state. Hey, all these guys are All-Stars, and people are coming to see them play, and they play 2 or 3 minutes. Right. They made a new rule, and this is about the time Billy played, that you have to play them so many minutes in the game because people want to see their player play. Mm-hmm. And Larry Bird, you ever heard that story?
Oh, yes.
You want to tell it?
Well, all I know is Larry wasn't happy, and didn't the coach ask him to go into the game late in the game, and he said, no, thank you, right? In certain terms.
Larry Bird said, I'm not going in that game. Game's over.
Yeah.
Maybe a minute to go.
One of the all-time greats in NBA history.
And
didn't get any minutes in the All-Star.
And Larry has said, I was the best player. He said, I was the best player there, and I got to play a couple, 3 minutes. Yeah. And so eventually they changed that, which is good. Mm-hmm. Because, man, people were driving 100 miles, to see their little small-town guy play. Right. But I never thought about that, Greg. I was so happy just to be there. I was part of the team. That's the only time I ever rode the bench. Mm-hmm. But being on that All-Star team was so incredible.
Yeah, and for the community.
We got to drive a lap around the Indianapolis track. We had 3 convertibles, And they took us all over the Indianapolis. We got to go to nursing homes and talk to people, and took us to movies. And they took us to the Indianapolis track. We each got to drive one lap around that track. Got to go to the museum, and they wined and dined us like crazy. And they don't do that now because there's so many AAU tournaments and class basketball, and so. But I'm so blessed. This great game of basketball, to this day, as old as I am, is so precious. That's why I wore this shirt, because basketball is my life, and I still want to play.
So you actually do graduate at University of Miami, right?
Got my degree in Miami. I have my master's degree from IU.
Did you go through graduation ceremonies at Miami?
And I was short 3 credits. I had to take one class in summer school, and went through ceremonies in summer. Yeah.
Okay.
And I got a call. I don't know if you want to talk about my going to St. John's.
Let's do this. Let's because we're about an hour in, and there's so much more to cover. If you're okay with that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We're about an hour in, so we're going to end part 1 here, because he's through college. It took him a lot to get there, a lot of accomplishments, and there's a lot more to go. So we're going to end this part 1. And in part 2, we're going to talk about life beyond college. We're going to talk a lot about St. John's years and the coaching and the few years that he spent there, but very treasurable times for sure. And of course, moving forward, his career, his family, the alumni golf. There's a lot more to cover. But we thank you for watching this part 1, and please tune in to part 2. Thank you.